I'm your host, Laura Berry, and welcome to Out of the Box, an interview series about the abusive practice of solitary confinement. For the next 7 weeks, you will be hearing some very personal and heartfelt stories of survivors of solitary confinement, family members of those in solitary, and experts working to change the narrative of how solitary is used. These stories are all very personal to me. After being imprisoned as a child and personally spending 11,962 days in prison, some of which was spent in solitary while pregnant from a sexual assault by a correctional officer, I know the horror of solitary confinement all too well. I have no doubt that you will be moved by these stories as well. So, without further ado, let's get started. Thank you, Kaleem, for joining me this afternoon and sharing a little bit about personal experiences of solitary confinement and why that should change. Um, just so that everybody have a little idea of who you are, kind of introduce yourself and your background a little bit in relevance to solitary.
Well, my name is Kaleem. I'm I'm of incarcerated, also a member of ICANN, and that's Incarcerated Children's Advocacy Network, a Washington-based organization that advocates for the first sentence of abuse. One of its main objectives is to end death by incarceration by juveniles. I'm a part of this organization because when I was 17 years old, I was convicted of murder and sentenced to a life without sentence in the Arkansas Department of Corrections. I ultimately served 28 years of that sentence, and within the course of that 28 years, I found myself in isolation approximately 10 to 15 of those years randomly. So I won't say I'm an expert on the subject of solitary confinement, but I have lived the experience of being caged in a cell and totally isolated from others. And I just feel, what inhumane thing to do, not only to our youth, but to people in general.
Thank you. And at first, I want to say thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and sharing of what we're going to talk about today. Um, so, going back to remembering maybe the first time you entered solitary, um, how did it make you feel? What kind of emotions did you experience? Just kind of share what that experience made you feel like.
Well, the first time I went to solitary confinement was really before I got to prison. When I received a life without sin, as soon as I stepped out of the courtroom and went back to the county jail, that's when they first put me in solitary confinement. And they housed me there for approximately 15 days until I was transferred to the Arkansas Department of Correction. And the first emotion that I can remember is fear. It's a very lonely place, and you have a lot of guys hollering, waging threats against you, and for a person who has never been in solitary confinement, when a person tell you, when the guards leave, I'm gonna come over there and get you, things of that nature. There, you don't know, just like you can't get out your cell, you don't know if they can't get out their cell. So it's a lot of fear, surrounding that, and loneliness, just the typical emotions that you can imagine that the one will feel.
So, moving forward into entering the Department of Corrections and
Hmm.
um, having the experience of solitary confinement, um, what type of effects do you feel solitary had on you personally, and possibly what you've observed of how it's affected other people that you knew?
Well, personally, I have a saying that anyone who goes to prison won't leave unchanged. You're gonna change. There's no question about it. You're gonna change. So, from a personal perspective, my days in solitary confinement kind of made me more, antisocial as far as, I didn't want to deal with people. I kind of went into my shell. Uh, uh, in one, well, really more than one time, I had contemplated the thought of suicide because I like to say that solitary confinement is the most dangerous place in prison because it puts you in a position where you really got to deal with yourself and look at your reality for what it is, or for what at that time you think it was in a way. Because you got to remember that a lot of people who they place in solitary confinement is at the most vulnerable points of their lives as far as uh, at the time that I was contemplating suicide, I was in what they call the quiet cell, and that's where they place you when they really want to isolate you. And I was like, man, is this my life? I have a life without sentence in Arkansas Department of Correction. I'm finding myself in solitary confinement where it's cold. They had took all my clothes, my blankets, and everything. It's really the quiet cell is something like a suicide cell watch, but they had placed me in there because they was mad at me. They had beat me down, physical violence and things of that nature. They're officers. So I was in this cell, and I really was contemplating on doing something to myself because I just didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to live where the authorities had control over my life. So, from a mental perspective, some say I was strong to be able to endure 28 years of prison, but uh, I feel that there's others that are stronger than me because I know guys who have been in solitary confinement for 10 and 15 years on end, and some guys have extreme mental health issues as far as in the way of they have devalue themselves to the extent where they playing with their fetus and things of that nature there. And I think it's important for a person to understand that a lot of people who are housed in solitary confinement really don't have disciplinary issues. They have mental health issues, but they really need to be treated as such. And I can contest to that on a personal level because in hindsight, when I look at some of my behavior and some of my behavior issues, some of my emotional issues. I'm not a psychologist or anything of that nature there, but I know from just my perspective, I was dealing with a high level of depression, and a lot of times when you place a person in solitary confinement, speaking from my perspective, I think it exacerbated that sense of depression, isolation, antisocial behavior, and things of that nature there. So I really don't feel that there's any intrinsic value that come along with solitary confinement. Uh, Whatever the behavior issue that the administration may justify on placing a person in confinement, whatever the issue is, I think that solitary confinement can only exacerbate it. So
So, in having these conversations with other survivors of solitary and having had the experience myself, I've heard it described as creating almost an animalistic feeling of being caged, like you're an animal, and basically reducing you to a point where you feel like you're a caged animal and you're deprived of any human contact. Did you experience those type of feelings at all?
Well, I think anyone that is placed in a cage challenge, really to view their humanity and really kind of do a deep search as far as, what am I becoming and who I'm truly am. And I think, what I'm saying, it kind of, goes back to the testament of the human spirit. Uh, Now, when you in these conditions, you have to make a decision for yourself, and I think each individual wrestle with this decision on their own terms on how I want to view myself and how I want to live. And I just feel like the environment don't make the man make the environment. So a lot of times, when I was in solitary confinement, even though we were restricted writing material, books, mail, anything to really challenge your mind to kind of get away from your present condition that was taken from you. So a lot of times when you're in these type of situations, you have to clam into yourself, in a sense, kind of live out your head. And that's what I found myself doing in a lot of my days that I spent in solitary confinement. It may look like I'm going crazy, but I lay on the bed and just look at the ceiling, and kind of clam into myself and in a sense live out my head. And a lot of times in an environment that isn't conducive to quietness, a lot of people think when you go to solitary confinement, it's a serene quietness, but that's far from the truth. You have guys, hauling in the vent, uh, whatever, it's chaotic, beating on the toilets, with their shower shoes and things of that nature there. So this process of climbing into your head is really challenging within itself. And I liken it to a form of meditation. And I learned to do that to uh, maintain my humanity and maintain my sanity when I find myself doing 6 months, a year in solitary confinement and things of that nature. Now, in these long, extended periods of time, even though a person may be surviving them per se, you're still losing a part of yourself because you don't have a social human contact. And that's an important part, what I'm saying, of being a human, being able to engage in, meaningful conversations, physical contact and things of that nature. So, as I said before, I'm a firm believer that solitary confinement has no intrinsic value. That I can't think of anything, that I can say I learned from solitary confinement other than, I don't want to go through that experience again.
Thank you. So, with all that you've shared, do you feel that there is a better way that the Department of Corrections can focus on changing solitary to a different form of um, process, a different process of um, approaching people that they feel have violated the rules or whatever the case may be that they use for the reason behind solitary. Do, do you feel that there could be a better way of doing that than solitary confinement that would have a lot less of a mental a destructive mental concept on people as a whole?
Well, just off the top of my head, I think that the Arkansas Department of Correction must create more incentivized programs as far as rewarding positive behavior, and in a sense, uh, punishing bad behavior, not so much by solitary confinement, but by, uh, things like, restrictions, commissary restrictions, movie restrictions, things of that nature there. And I think, what I'm saying, if you reward good behavior, which the ADC really doesn't, with different programs that guys would like to be involved in, whether it be, the band program, college programs, which that's non-existent in ADC, and things of that nature. There, we wouldn't have a need for solitary confinement because people will, in a sense, conform their behavior, their petty behaviors, because a lot of times that's what people land up in solitary confinement for things like disobeying a direct order, out of place of assignment, not reporting to work, and things of that nature. There. So, these minute violations will place a person, in a situation where their mental capacity as a human being is being challenged for you not, reporting to work duty. So I think, what I'm saying, that if there was more incentivized programs offered at ADC, Arkansas Department of Correction, then what I'm saying, in a sense, it'll play itself out, it'll smooth itself out. Dealing with the mental health issues, that permeates throughout solitary confinement. I just think, that there need to be better qualified mental health staff available for guys who have these different mental health issues. As we all know, that a lot of times, not just solitary confinement, but the ADC has taken the place of different established mental health institutions that have been shut down over the course of the last 20 years. So people who need the mental health treatment have been deferred to the ADC as far as have they mental health issues have been criminalized. So that's why you find a lot of guys, in prison spending 10 and 15 years in solitary confinement because of their mental health issues, not because so much of their behavior issues, is their mental health issues. And I think, that that'll be worth investing in from the perspective of the ADC to invest in more thorough mental health training, and also, with the officers need to be taught how to deal with guys who have mental health issues, because you can't deal with a guy who have mental health issues the same way that you deal with a guy that doesn't, have these extreme mental health issues. So I think from that perspective, these are some of the changes that need to be implemented within the ADC to curb solitary confinement, if not abolish it, within the system altogether. So I hope I answered the question that you asked. I know I'm kind of long-winded.
No, absolutely. I just want to thank you for taking the time to share today. And I know that it's hard to reach back in and kind of relive some of the things that happened. But in order to help others understand it, you taking the time to open yourself and share with is greatly appreciated. And I just want to say thank you for joining me today. And it's an honor for you to join me and take part in our campaign to end solitary confinement.
Oh, yeah, I thank you guys for inviting me to this forum.
Thank you.
I can't help but believe that after hearing the story today, you're motivated to join us in this fight. Here are a few ways to get involved. Read our report about solitary confinement on Decarcerate's website. Follow us online over the next several weeks. We'll be posting lots of content about solitary confinement on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Donate to the campaign. It's only through the financial contributions of supporters like you that we're able to continue this work. And finally, send us an email to join our monthly End Solitary meetings where you can learn how to volunteer with us and help us strategize our work. Again, thank you.